Hey guys, welcome back. I know it's been about 2 or 3 weeks since we last spoke. I took a much needed short break, but I'm happy to say we're back. I'm back in one of my favorite cities in all of planet Earth. Now, it's actually my second day here. Last night, I already managed to get myself into some trouble where I played 2-5 no limit with none other than Ethan from Rampage Poker and somehow found myself into that game for $10,000. Unfortunately, I did not vlog that session, but I think he did, so it'll probably be on his channel in like 3 months or however long it takes him to edit these videos, right? But yeah, I somehow got out of the hole, so I'm happy to say that at least it was a profitable night. Now, today is day 2, and I think we're also going to link up for a session at none other than Resorts World. Now, the cool thing about Resorts World, for those of you who haven't heard of it yet, is it's the first new property on the Strip, like a major hotel casino, in I think like 10 years. And of course, they got a poker room. Now, as far as I know, they don't got a lot of games going, but we're going to try our best to start a 5-10. But you guys know how it is. It's Vegas, maybe the game will go, maybe it won't, and who knows where we'll end up. I'm here in town for just a few more days, so expect the next vlog or two to be from here as well. I know how much you guys like these Vegas vlogs. I certainly enjoy making them. Like I said, it's one of my favorite cities. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So without any further ado, let's head to Resorts World and play some cards. Alright, how's it going guys? Back at it here today playing some 5-10 in Las Vegas. Buy-in for this game is a 3,000 max, so that's what I decided to buy in for. So here we go, playing some 5-10. In the first interesting hand, I look down at Ace-Jack in early position. Standard raised to $30. We see a call from the button, and then the big blind, who looks like an experienced player, raises it up to 130. Now, given that we're short-handed and the button made the call, I feel like he's going to be incentivized to do this with a fair amount of hands, not just very strong ones. So when the action's back to me, I wouldn't really hate folding, but I think continuing is a little better. Just a question of whether we want to do that through a re-raise or just a flat call. If I put in the call, then the button is likely going to call as well, and playing a hand in between two different players isn't too advisable. So I decided to take the aggressive route right off the bat and make it 330. The button folds, and now it gets back to the big blind, who decides to make the call. So heads up already to a pretty decent sized pot. Flop comes down Queen 9-7, 2 spades. Obviously not much going on for myself, but when he checks it over to me, I could still for sure have a lot of strong hands like aces, kings, ace queen suited, ace king of spades, for example, etc. So with all those holdings and also my not so good ones like Ace-Jack, I think a small bet makes a lot of sense. Could get some folds right away from hands like jacks and tens or perhaps Ace-King. So I put in a small bet and he folds. So we win the first one of the night. Now in the second hand, we're going to play our first hand ever against Rampage Poker himself. In this one, I look down at pocket sevens. I raise it up to $30 and get raised by Ethan on my direct left to 100. Action gets back to me, and I really see no point besides calling, so that's what I do. And we go to a flop of 8-6-5. So we flop an open-ended straight draw on a board that's going to be pretty good for me and not so much for him. However, I'm still going to check it over to him and see what he does, and what he decides to do is check it back. Once that happens, I pretty much right away decide that I'm going to be overbetting any turn card. But when we see the 7 of diamonds, things get a little bit interesting, right? Because Now we make a set, but obviously it's very easy to have a straight on this board. However, I still think this is a board where I would have so many strong hands and he could be checking back hands even as strong as some overpairs that are scared to get raised on this board. So I still think an overbet makes a lot of sense despite our hand actually improving. Anyhow, I make it $300 and he doesn't think too long before calling. Off to a river card which further complicates things. It's the 4 of diamonds, which brings in the backdoor flush draw, as well as now obviously putting a straight on the board. So we no longer have a set, we're just playing the board. So I think in this case it's just a matter of who's more likely to have a 9 or perhaps even a flush. And I think the answer is very easily me. Just based on the pre-flop action, we would have a lot more suited combinations and a lot more hands that contain a 9. And I expect him to know that. So once again, I think the play is to bet fairly large, since if the river goes check check, I expect we'll be just chopping a lot of the time. But chopping's no fun, I'd rather win this one. So I'm going to try to put him in a tough spot here and put in a bet of $1,200. Eventually, after thinking it over for a minute, he shows pocket aces and lets it go. So nice to get away with this one. In the third hand of the night, we decide to play a $50 double board bomb pot. I look down at 8-6 offsuit in the small blind. The top flop comes out king 7 deuce, not a lot going on. However, the bottom board is 7-5-4 with a flush draw, so we flop the stone cold nuts on that one. I check it and now the big blind bets $100. Player in late position calls. Now it's time to spring the trap and raise it up, so I make it $400. The player in the big blind calls, but the player behind him folds. So heads up here going to a couple of turn cards, which are the 3 of hearts and the 3 of diamonds. Shouldn't really change much. We've still got the nuts on the bottom. And if he's got a strong hand on the top, it would be great if we could get him to fold that. So I put in a bet of $1,000. Now he thinks it over for a little bit before deciding to move all in for $2,300. Not much of a decision here. I make the call. So we're off to see a couple of rivers, which are the deuce of spades on the top and the 8 of clubs on the bottom. So a little bit sketchy because the board that we're playing ends up with a flush, as well as some better straights available now, but turns out we're chopping actually against ace 7 offsuit, which is a little surprising. I gotta say, it's not really that strong of a hand, so not super sure what's going on here, but hey, better than losing, I guess. Moving right along, in the next hand, the straddle is on, and I look down at pocket 10s in early position. Big blind makes the call, and now the straddler raises to $340. Not looking to fold a hand this strong, especially in position against an aggressive opponent who could certainly have a lot of hands in this spot. So I make the call, and the player in the big blind gets out of the way. Heads up here to a flop of 5-3 deuce. He continues for $440. Not really in love with the situation, but we didn't call pre-flop to just fold an overpair on the flop. So I make the call, and we're off to see a turn card, which is the king of hearts. Obviously a pretty terrible card for myself, but when he bets $820, I sort of just convinced myself that this was a pretty strong opponent who would be using this card as a scare card, if you will, with hands like ace-queen, ace-jack suited, ace-10, just a bunch of bluffs that he could certainly have in this spot. Now, even though he could have those bluffs, I gotta admit calling here is still not a very good play. This is just me getting a little bit too sticky with the hand. Not really advisable, but anyway, I decided to make the call, knowing that I could still have the best hand a small chunk of the time. But unfortunately, the river is now a queen of hearts, so some of those bluffs that I put him on the turn obviously improve. And now he goes all in for $2,040. Pretty nasty spot, only because I called on the turn. Now it makes me really not want to fold on this river, but after thinking it over for a minute, I realize there's really no reason to compound what could easily be a mistake here on the turn by making another bad call on this river. I don't know, sometimes I just get these gut feelings that people are bluffing, and that's kind of what was going on here. But obviously those can be wrong, as was the case this time, because after I eventually folded, he was nice enough to show me, and he had pocket kings. So the instincts were way off on that one. Of course, that happens sometimes. Anyway, moving right along to the next hand. In this one, Rampage opens up for $30. Player next to act makes it $100 on his direct left. This had also been a fairly aggressive opponent, so when the action gets back to me in the big blind and I look down at ace queen of clubs, I think our hand is still very, very strong in this situation. So I make it $280. A little bit surprisingly, Ethan decides to call, and then the player behind him calls as well. So three ways here, going to a flop of Jack 10-3 with a club. I check it, and now Ethan bets $250, a pretty small bet. And then the player behind him makes the call, so already a pretty weird hand developing here. I'm not really in love with it, but given that we have a draw to the nuts if a king comes, as well as a potential backdoor flush draw, we're getting a really good price here, and I think it's going to be pretty easy to get away from on the turn unimproved. So I decided to make the call and see what happens. So still three ways here going to a turn, which is the ace of spades. So we improved to top pair, but not really in love with it, honestly. I feel like we could very easily still be behind. So once again, I check it. This time Ethan decides to check it as well, and the player behind him checks. So the turn checks all the way around. We're off to see one last card, which is the four of clubs. So we end up with just top pair. I check it for a third time, and now Ethan decides to bet pretty hefty, $1,700. Player behind him folds, and I just don't think this is almost ever a bluff. He's betting really big into two opponents who could easily have some very strong holdings, so I don't think about it too long and just let it go. I just had the feeling on the flop that we were looking for a king, not an ace or a queen, and it seems like those suspicions are confirmed when Ethan later tells me he had pocket jacks. At this point in the night, I get kind of card dead. I've got a pretty clean image at this table. All right, so here we go. The straddle is on. Player in early position opens to 60. Player behind him calls, and now a player in middle position raises to $200. Action gets to me in late position, and I look down at 7-6 of clubs. Now, for the most part, I think this hand is going to be a fold, given that there's an open in early position, a caller behind him, and then a re-raise. But some very small percentage of the time, I think it's okay to mix some hands in like these as a re-raise, just to balance out with, you know, the strong stuff like aces, kings, queens, etc. And as you guys can probably guess, this was one of those times. So I decided to re-raise. I make it $490. Action gets back to the player who made it $200, and he decides to call. At this point, he's got around $3,000, and I cover him, so still plenty left to play for as we go heads up to a flop in position of 7-5 deuce with 2 diamonds and 1 club. He checks it over to me, and I think I'm happy to just bet small. So I bet 310, and now he check raises, but it's pretty small. He makes it $750. Given what I'd seen from this player so far, and just the way the hand has played out, what I mostly think this is going to consist of is hands like pocket 9s, 10s, and jacks. Given that I've only got a 7, and I guess some backdoor possibilities, I think it's time to turn our hand into a bluff. I feel like if I rip it all in right here, it's going to be very difficult for him to call with a hand like jacks, for example. Plus, if we do get called, it's not the end of the world, right? We can still improve to a hand like trips or 2 pairs, etc. So that's what I do. I move all in for around 2,300 that he had left behind. And now at this point, he seems quite frustrated with the situation and lets me know that he's got pocket jacks. He doesn't seem like he wants to call, but a few minutes go by and it doesn't really seem like he wants to fold either. Anyway, after a long, painful period of thinking, he says, "Enjoy my money, I fold." Whew. So that was a close one, but luckily it went our way, and we take down a nice little pot after a few hours of being quiet. Shortly after that hand, I look down at king queen in late position and make it $30. And once again, Ethan raises me on my direct left. He makes it $100. We're pretty deep here, so not much to do besides making the call. That's what I do, and we go to a flop of 9-6-6 with 2 spades. I check it over to him, and he puts in a bet of $70. And I just don't know about this. We're really deep, and I could certainly have a 6. So I decide, let's raise it up and see if Mr. Rampage Poker can hang on for 3 fat streets of aggression. I make it 320, getting ready to buckle down for what I expect could be a big pot, and then he shows 7 deuce offsuit and folds. So it seems like he was just getting a little out of line there, but honestly I can't really fault him because even though I don't hate check raising on this flop, this is a pretty lame hand to do it with. So whatever, it looks like we were both punting a little bit. But king high is better than 7 high, so I guess that counts. Anyway, after this hand, nothing really too interesting happened, so we decided to rack up and change locations.
So this guy won like a Honda Civic or something. I won $390 over the course of like 5 or 6 hours or something.
Some of it was mine. I think most of your profit was from that stupid hit.
Luckily, like if this guy hadn't been in the game, it might have been a losing session.
But I'm here to provide.
Yeah, and if it was a losing session, I would have had to delete the vlog, but
Because that's how it works.
luckily now I get to post this.
You're welcome. You're welcome
Yeah.
to subscribe and watch this video.
Dude, it is 10:30 and it's like 100 degrees. So now the play is to link up at like the win or something and continue playing because we want to keep playing, and also I didn't get enough hands to really call this a proper vlog. So yeah, I'll catch you guys wherever we end up, right?
Let's go.
Let's go. Currently reporting from the sports book here at Flamingo. Last time we spoke was like 2 or 3 days ago now, and well, a lot has happened since then, but unfortunately not really in the poker department. I've actually been really card dead for most of this trip, but there have been a few interesting hands that I could report back to you guys right now. The first of which comes from later that night where you guys just saw. We did end up at the win and actually got to play a session with the man himself, Andrew Nemi. Sadly, I didn't really find any interesting spots, aside from one semi-fun hand. In this one, I'm in the straddle for $10. Action gets to Andrew in the small blind, and he raises to $40, I believe. Big blind gets out of the way, and I look down at Queen 10 suited. Kind of a spot where we can mix between raising and just calling. Seeing as this is the first time I ever play against this guy, I don't really want to be too cutthroat right off the bat. So I decide to just call, and we go to a 10 high flop. He checks it over to me, and I think I'm happy to just start betting here. I would have a lot of bluffs in this spot, but this time I have the toppest of pairs. Seems like a good spot to put some money in the pot, so that's what I do. And Andrew decides to call. So we go off to a turn card, which doesn't change too much, aside from maybe improving some of my bluffs that I would have on the flop. So for that reason, when he checks it over to me, I think an overbet makes a lot of sense. Obviously, in this case, it's a value bet, and it does seem a little bit silly to bet this big with a hand that's not really that strong. But like I said, we would have a ton of bluffs in this situation, and as you guys probably know, Andrew's capable of calling down pretty light. So I put in a pretty chunky bet here, I think a little over pot, and he makes the call. So a pretty sizable pot brewing here. And the river brings a queen. So we end up improving to 2 pair. Not really an improvement that I think we necessarily needed, but on the off chance that he was playing a hand like aces or kings in this fashion, we obviously improved to a better hand than that. So again, when he checks it to me, I see no reason to not bet. This time, however, he does find a fold after thinking it over for a bit, and turns out he had ace high, or so he said. So we were getting absolutely no credit there, and I guess I'll make the mental note to never try to bluff Andrew. Over the next 2 days, I did hang out quite a bit with Ethan, like I said. We got some dinner, which was a lot of fun. We flipped for the bill, and of course, your boy won the flip. So Ethan, thanks again for dinner, man. You really need to work on your flipping game. And then speaking of flips, we found ourselves at the Flamingo playing some 1-2 no limit later on that night, or maybe the next night. It's all kind of a blur. But again, we got into a flip situation for all of $250-ish, in which I had pocket eights and he had king jack. And well, you guys can probably take a guess who won that flip as well. yes. Sweet Rampage chips. So yeah, the trip has been going great. Today is Sunday morning, I want to say. Again, I could be wrong. But the plan is to maybe relax a little bit since this trip has been a little bit hectic. And the next vlog coming up is going to be an Aria 510 session, which again, I think Rampage Poker will be joining me for. So if you guys are interested, make sure to stay tuned for that next video. But that's it for this time, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for all the support. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.